The word torta in Spain means cake. In Mexico, it means a sandwich. In Argentina, it's a slang for a slap across the face. All Spanish. Three completely different meanings. And ordering the wrong one will either confuse you, offend you, or leave you hungry. There are thousands of words like this. Spanish left Spain 500 years ago, and every country it landed in reshaped it so completely that a sentence perfectly normal in Madrid can be meaningless in Buenos Aires, hilarious in Bogota, and rude in Santiago. A speaker from Chile can sound very different to a listener from Mexico, and some words mean very different things depending on the country. A Puerto Rican calls something coger, a neutral word in the Caribbean meaning to grab, in a room full of Spaniards, and the room goes silent. This is not one language with small regional accents. This is one language that spread across many regions and changed in each place it touched. Welcome to the Airlearn Language Show. Speaking of languages, I want to take a second to talk about Airlearn. I've been recommending it on this channel for a while now, and I genuinely mean it every time. If you have been sitting with a language on your mind and one you've always wanted to learn, one you've started and dropped, or one you're just curious about, this is me telling you to stop waiting and just go try it. Link is in the description. Now, here's how Spanish became 20 languages all at once. Spain, the starting point. Spanish did not begin as Spanish. It began as Vulgar Latin, the spoken informal Latin that Roman soldiers and merchants carried across conquered territories. In the region of Castile in northern Spain, that Latin evolved over centuries into what became Castellan, and Castellan became the template for everything that followed. But before Spanish left Spain, something happened to it that left a permanent mark. For roughly 700 years, large parts of the Iberian Peninsula were under Moorish rule. Arabic was the language of the most advanced civilization on the peninsula, and Spanish absorbed it. Around 8% of Spanish vocabulary is often estimated to be Arabic in origin. Ojalá, hopefully, from inshallah, God willing. Almohada, pillow. Azúcar, sugar. Asiente, oil. The words are so embedded that most Spanish speakers have no idea they're speaking Arabic every time they use them. Then, 1492, three things happened in the same year. The fall of the Granada ended Moorish rule in Spain. Columbus reached the Americas, and one of the first grammars of a modern European language was published, Spanish, by Antonio de Nebrija, who told Queen Isabella it would be the companion of the empire. He was right in the ways he did not fully anticipate. Spanish was about to leave home and never come back the same. Mexico. Spanish arrived in Mexico in 1519 and collided immediately with one of the most complex civilizations in the Americas. The Aztec Empire spoke Nahuatl, and Nahuatl left deposits in Spanish that spread not just across Latin America, but across the entire world. Chocolate, tomate, aguacate, avocado, chile, cacao, chicle, all Nahuatl words that entered Spanish in Mexico and then traveled everywhere else. When you say chocolate in English, you're speaking Nahuatl through Spanish. The food vocabulary of the entire world was partially rewritten by the contact between Spanish and the Aztec language. Mexican Spanish also preserved structures from the 16th century colonial Spanish that Spain itself later abandoned. In some ways, Mexican Spanish is more conservative than the Spanish spoken in Spain today, a linguistic time capsule carrying forms that evolved away in the original. Pronunciation is clear and consonant-heavy, each syllable given full weight. And then there's the cultural dominance question. When Hollywood dubs films into Spanish, it uses Mexican Spanish. When Latin American television wants a neutral standard, it defaults to Mexican Spanish. This makes Mexican Spanish the de facto global reference point for the language, which irritates every other Latin American country consistently and loudly. Argentina. Between 1880 and 1930, waves of Italian immigrants landed in Argentina. At the peak, nearly half the population of Buenos Aires was Italian-born or first-generation Italian, and those immigrants did not just bring their labor, they brought their language, and Italian got into Argentine Spanish so deeply that it changed how the language sounds. The melodic rise and fall of Porteño Spanish and the Spanish of Buenos Aires is Italian intonation, not resembling Italian. Italian. If you close your eyes and listen to someone from Buenos Aires speaking quickly, your brain will briefly tell you it sounds like Naples. Argentine Spanish also uses vos instead of tu, a completely different pronoun for the second person singular, with its own distinct verb conjugations that exist nowhere else in the standard Spanish-speaking world. A Mexican learning Argentine Spanish has to unlearn their conjugations and relearn them. Then there is lunfardo, a slang system that emerged from the immigrant streets of Buenos Aires in the late 19th century, mixing Italian, Portuguese, French, indigenous words, and Spanish into something that belongs entirely to Argentina. Lunfardo became embedded in tango lyrics. Some of it became standard Buenos Aires speech without people realizing it arrived from outside the language entirely. In Argentine, speaking to a Spaniard sounds like a distant cousin who somehow picked up an Italian accent. The Caribbean, Cuban, Dominican, and Puerto Rican Spanish operate by different rules. Final consonants soften or disappear entirely. The letter S at the end of a syllable becomes a breath of air or nothing at all. R's and L's swap positions. Entire syllables compress. ¿Cómo estás? How are you comes out of a Dominican mouth as something closer to ¿Cómo está? I'm not saying it right, but the rhythm is faster, more syncopated, more musical. The reason is history. The Caribbean was the first stop for the Spanish in the Americas and the center of the transatlantic slave trade. West African languages, Yoruba, Wolof, Fon, came into contact with Spanish through enslaved people and left marks on the rhythm, the phonology, and the vocabulary of the Caribbean Spanish that are audible to this day. Caribbean Spanish is also the variety most consistently mocked and stigmatized by other Spanish speakers, treated as lazy, incorrect, degraded. The dropped consonants read as carelessness to ears trained in other varieties. And then reggaeton happened. Bad Bunny sings in Puerto Rican Spanish. J Balvin in Colombian with Caribbean influence. Ozuna, Daddy Yankee, all Caribbean. Caribbean artists have become hugely influential across the Spanish-speaking world. The stigmatized dialect became the sound of the culture. Chile. There's a running joke across Latin America. Chileans don't speak Spanish. They speak Chilean. It's not entirely a joke. Chilean Spanish is legendary among Spanish speakers for being nearly incomprehensible to outsiders. The S at the end of syllables is heavily aspirated or dropped completely. Speech is fast and compressed. Slang is dense and self-referential. Cachai, from the English to catch, meaning you know or get it, appears at the end of sentences consistently. Mapuche indigenous vocabulary layers over everything. A Mexican visiting Chile for the first time will understand roughly 70% of what they hear. An Argentine will do slightly better. A Spaniard will nod politely and understand perhaps half. The Chileans are aware of this. They're not particularly bothered by it. Two cases the world almost never discusses. The Philippines. Spanish was the official language of the government for over 300 years of colonial rule. Filipino vocabulary is packed with Spanish. Cuchara, from cuchara, spoon. Silla, from siwa, chair. Ventana, from ventana, window. Then the United States took the Philippines from Spain in 1898 and replaced Spanish with English in schools within a single generation. Today, only a small number of people in the Philippines speak Spanish fluently. 3 centuries of presence erased in 30 years. But walk through any Tagalog sentence and Spanish is still there, hiding inside the words waiting to be recognized. Equatorial Guinea, the only Spanish-speaking country in sub-Saharan Africa. 1.5 million people. Official language, Spanish, spoken with a Central African rhythm and vocabulary that exists nowhere else in the Hispanophone world. almost entirely absent from any global conversation about Spanish. Spain's forgotten colony, so thoroughly forgotten that most Spanish speakers are genuinely surprised to learn it exists. The United States. 42 million native Spanish speakers currently live in the United States. Some projections suggest the United States could become one of the largest Spanish-speaking populations in the world by 2050. And the Spanish being spoken in Los Angeles, Miami, and New York is already something entirely new. Spanglish is generally understood by linguists as code switching and mixing with its own patterns, not just broken Spanish. English syntax carrying Spanish vocabulary. Spanish sentence structure absorbing English verbs. A generation that moves between both languages mid-sentence, not because they cannot commit to one, but because the combination expresses something that neither language alone fully captures. The Real Academia Española, the institution in Madrid that officially governs the Spanish language, issues rulings on correct usage that the Spanish-speaking United States ignores completely. The Spanish used in the United States often evolves independently of official standards. The language does not wait for institutions. It just keeps moving. One language left one country 500 years ago. It hit the Aztecs and absorbed their food words. It hit Argentina and started singing like Italian. It hit the Caribbean and dropped half its consonants. It hit Chile and became incomprehensible. It hit the Philippines and it almost died. It hit Africa and was forgotten. It hit the United States and started merging with English. The Spanish spoken in Madrid today and the Spanish spoken in Buenos Aires, Havana, Santiago, and Miami are technically the same language. But speak to any Spanish speaker and they'll tell you technically is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Spanish didn't spread. It shape-shifted. And every version of it carries the history of the place that changed it. The Aztec Empire in Mexican food words, the Italian immigration in an Argentine melody, the slave trade in a Caribbean rhythm, the American occupation in Philippine absence. A language is never just a language. It is a record of every collision it survived. Airlearn has Spanish, and now you know why picking which Spanish matters. A good problem to have. Links in the description. See you in the next one.